The Russian Formula One driver Nikita Mazepin has been dropped by his team Haas for the 2022 season. In a statement, the team says they are shocked and saddened by the invasion of Ukraine. They've not yet confirmed who will replace Mazepin in the team. We'll have a full sports roundup at past.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app and via your smart speaker.
Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be.
Hello, this is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio with news, current affairs, culture and conversation right up until 1pm. It is currently about 11:05. Thanks very much for being with me. After 12, I'll be talking with the Ukrainian writer Andrei Kurkov about the conflict in his country and about being tipped off that he's on Russia's wanted list. Around 12:15, I'll be joined by the crime novelist Anne Cleeves to chat about her new book, The Heron's Cry. And after 12:30, the comedian Sarah Kendall will be chatting to me about her comedy drama Frayed on Sky Max. So there's a lot coming up. There's more TV actually as well after 11:30 with Jenny Colgan. She'll be reviewing Peaky Blinders, Killing Eve, Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes and The Dropout on Disney+. If you've seen any of those, do send me your thoughts. Text us on 87222. Start your message with the word Times. Tweet us at Times Radio or email us on studio@times.radio as ever. And in around 10 minutes' time, I'll be speaking to the Booker Prize-winning novelist Howard Jacobson about his new memoir, Mother's Boy. And indeed, I can see him out the window right now. But first, I'm joined by the Times diplomatic correspondent Catherine Philp, who is in Kyiv to discuss the latest on the conflict in Ukraine. Hello, Catherine. How are you?
Hello, Hugo. I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks very much for being with us. Slightly later than normal and in somewhat different circumstances.
Indeed. One of the more unusual calls I've done into your show.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm not going to ask you about all the usual things, such as whether you go on dates in the gym. I'm going to ask you about Ukraine. Look, news this morning of a ceasefire in two areas, allowing civilians to evacuate. Which areas and what more do we know?
Those are areas quite a long way from Kyiv. So we're talking about Kharkiv and Mariupol, which have been surrounded and taken very heavy bombardment. So the hope is that civilians who want to leave those areas will be able to get out safely. They just have not been able to do that under the current bombardment.
And when we talk about evacuation, do we know, how will that happen? In what direction will they be able to go? Is this evacuation towards Russia or going the other way?
That will very much depend on where those people want to go. The forces are surrounding those cities, so my guess is that they will, whatever direction they get out of the city, they are most likely to want to go west towards Poland. There may be people, say, in Kharkiv who want to go to Russia. It is very close to the Russian border and has got very strong links with Russia. There's a large population living there. But obviously, east is not the direction that most Ukrainians want to flee in, given that's where the aggression is coming from.
Of course. Look, and tell us about in Kyiv at the moment. What's the latest from the fighting around there, and how are residents feeling?
Yeah, I'm driving down a road in Kyiv as we speak. Just been to visit the zoo, as you do. It's actually, Kyiv has, after several days of being incredibly deserted when it was first getting pounded by missiles and shelling on the outskirts, it's actually come slightly back to life again. The trams are running, which stopped for a while, extraordinarily. We've even managed to pick up some coffee. So people, I think, have, going into the second week of this invasion, I think people are starting to learn to live with what's going on, and also appreciating that given that Russian troops are outside the capital and attempting to close in on it, that soon they may be seeing the kind of scenes that we've seen more of in places like Kharkiv. But this city is already very heavily defended by army regulars and volunteers who wear this. They have this yellow tape around their arms, so you can tell that those are the territorial defense forces. But we're just actually driving down a street now where there's a checkpoint that they've set up. It seems to be mostly sandbags, which we haven't seen that much of. Concrete blocks and tires, and those are all around the city. So if you were a Russian trying to get into the center of Kyiv, you're going to come across a lot of these and a lot of resistance. All these men are carrying guns and are, pretty up for defending their city.
Wow.
Oh, hold on. They're actually making sandbags here.
Well,
they're
they're filling them up.
Yeah, there's a huge pile of sand, and they've got shovels and sacks. And yeah, so that's where they're making sandbags. So perhaps that's why we're starting to see those. They're just being put together. It's much like civilians getting together and making Molotov cocktails out of their old wine bottles and empties, and preparing, sort of stacking those up for if they have to defend the city.
So you said things like trams are running again. How much of when you're moving around the city as you are at the moment, how much of what you see is just sort of frantic preparations for conflict, and how much is people going about their usual lives?
I'd say it's more preparation than normal. There's obviously a lot of people have left the city. There's about 15,000 people who've moved into the underground station. So it's kind of as if this were London, that all the tube stations are turned into bomb shelters because it's very deep. People are going out and getting food, getting supplies, what in between sort of air raid warnings. But then most of what you see on the streets is are these kind of preparations and these barricades going up.
And the preparations you can see now, people filling sandbags, are they regular forces, or are they armed local people, or can you tell?
Yes, you can. It's quite clear. These are they're called the Territorial Defence Force, but they are all civilians. And in fact, this is the force that the Ukrainians have urged British former soldiers to join. I'm not quite sure what the status of that is with the government at the moment, so perhaps better not to encourage. But they are a very disciplined and regular force. I mean, they are civilians, but they are under the loose control of the military. And they are taking, shift patterns, and they are being deployed in squads around the city. So mostly they are defending their own neighbourhood. So they have a very strong motive to do that.
And does this make it intimidating at all, roaming around, or is there a sense of unity?
So I would say that it's probably calmer than it was. The first few days, there was intense anxiety about reports of Russian infiltrators into the city. So people checking we'll check our passport and our press cards at every stop. And they've become much more relaxed over time. But there was a incredible tension when there were reports of these irregulars, Russian mercenaries and special forces around the city. Now we usually they're very grateful for the support they've got from the Brits. A lot of the weaponry we've seen is actually British, and so when they see our British passports, that usually goes down quite well, which is an unusual feeling for some of the reporting I've done in the past.
Wow.
So that's quite pleasant, and we usually they usually give us a cry of Slava Ukraine when we leave, which means glory to Ukraine, which has kind of become a greeting now in the city between people, to show that they're all kind of on the same side.
Yeah, wow, amazing. Look, the Director General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, last night was echoing leaders around the West, saying a no-fly zone over Ukraine was a no-go. What's the thought about that kind of thing that you come across in Kyiv?
People are really disappointed by it. They understand the military rationale. They understand this idea that NATO, doesn't want to risk getting into a wider conflict with Russia, but they still feel that really they are standing up for the whole of Europe and not just their own country. And I think that's got pretty strong reactions yesterday as well, when there was the fire at the nuclear plant. And I think, that lots of Ukrainian leaders, officials have sort of taken that as an example and said, look, if that happens, that will affect all of Europe very directly, as indeed this conflict will in its entirety, so that they are still, they've not given up on this idea that they may be able to compel NATO into taking firmer action, and the no-fly zone being that they've got a slogan here called "Save Ukraine, Close the Sky."
Wow! So,
and then save the world underneath. Meaning, this is not just putting the point forward that it's not just about Ukraine, that you'll be you'll be saving Europe.
I mean, that's sort of fascinating and moving that while we see a sort of a local conflict and we think to ourselves that this could develop into a war between Russia and the West, they see themselves as being on the front line of a war between Russia and the West already.
Already, absolutely.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Look, in terms of the debates we're having here about reducing dependency on Russian fuel and sanctions on oligarchs and that kind of thing, how much is that filtering through into the people you speak to?
I think in the early days when the very first sanctions were being imposed, there was disappointment about how light they were. I think as time's gone on, people here have been surprised and delighted by how much effect they've already had on Russia. There always is a gleeful conversation with anyone you see about where the ruble has slumped to at any particular moment. Every Ukrainian seems to know the exchange rate and is delighted to see the ruble crashing. So yeah, they're very aware of those things happening, and obviously they just urging more action, always thanking the outside world for what it's doing, but saying now we need more.
Absolutely. Well, look, Catherine, thanks very much for joining us. Stay well, and hope to have you back on the show again in happier times. And you can, of course, read more from Catherine in The Times, along with all the award-winning analysis and commentary. Pick up today's paper, complete with all the Saturday magazines, wherever you get your papers, or you can read it all online. You'll need a digital subscription, but remember that your first month is free. On this programme after 12, I'll be speaking to the Ukrainian novelist Andrei Kurkov from the country, who's received information that he's wanted by the Russians for his outspoken criticism of Vladimir Putin. But next up, I will be speaking to the Booker Prize-winner Howard Jacobson on his new memoir. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio in association with NetWealth. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Tom Newton-Dunn. Tomorrow morning from 10 on Times Radio.
The Ukraine crisis is only worsening. Russia's blitzkrieg invasion has morphed into a brutal war of attrition and has also now spawned a humanitarian crisis of almost biblical proportions. What should and can the West do next? We'll put that to two former intelligence chiefs from both Britain and the US and speak to Romania's foreign minister to see what his country needs to handle the huge influx of refugees pouring over the border. My G in the co-pilot's chair this week is The Spectator's Katie Balls. And as always, we'll speak to a cabinet minister and a member of the shadow cabinet.
Tom Newton-Dunn. Tomorrow morning from 10 on Times Radio.
This is an urgent appeal from the Disasters Emergency Committee. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled their homes to escape conflict in Ukraine, leaving jobs, belongings and loved ones behind. They need shelter, food and water. You can help. To donate online, search DEC or text radio to 70150 to give £10. Thank you.
Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Hello, this is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio. It is 17 minutes past 11. After 11:30, I'll be talking about the week's TV with Jenny Colgan. We'll be looking at Peaky Blinders, Killing Eve, Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes, and Amanda Seyfried in The Dropout. That's after 11:30, so stick around for that. Now, it is my theory that only the unhappy, the uncomfortable, the gauche, the badly put together aspire to make art. Why would you seek to reshape the world unless you were ill at ease in it? And I came out of the womb, in every sense, the wrong way around. That is a quote from the novelist Howard Jacobson's new memoir, Mother's Boy, which was published on Thursday. Jacobson's comic outsider angst runs through his outstanding career, which with awards including the Man Booker Prize for The Finkler Question in 2010. And I'm delighted to say he joins me now in the studio. Howard Jacobson, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much for being with us. Let's dive right in. Tell me about being ill at ease in the world and how it's informed or driven your writing.
It was how it felt. We know what it's like when you're remembering a long time ago and you don't know whether you're remembering the real thing or the last thing you said about it. But I do my best to remember accurately, and I have this theory that if you try really, really hard, you can remember all the way back. I have this theory that if you remember really, really hard, you remember 2,000 years back, the culture in your genes. But anyway, I'll start with myself. And I think I remember just not liking being a baby. I didn't like the way I looked when I saw myself in the mirror. I thought that's a daft way to look. I didn't like the way they dressed me. Do you remember a romper suit?
Yes.
Maybe you're too young for a romper suit.
No, I had a romper suit.
You had a romper suit, which was studded had studs in a very uncomfortable position. You couldn't lie down and be comfortable. Everywhere you moved, you felt wrong. I didn't want to be dressed like that. I didn't want to be talked to like that. I didn't want people leaning over my pram and dribbling in my face. Nothing about being a baby was nice, and nothing about being a little boy was nice. So that my only way out, really, I discovered very early, was to kind of write about this, really.
So it was a romper suit that made you a writer, in a way.
A romper suit made me a writer. I'd like to put... Can I put that on the front of my hardback, the paperback?
You may indeed. Look, you'll be 80 years old this year. Do you still feel as uncomfortable?
Well, I don't wear romper suits anymore, so that helps. I don't feel as physically uncomfortable, but I feel unhappy in the world. But though right this moment, I don't know a single person who doesn't feel unhappy in the world. It's almost as though, the world has finally caught up with me and has to admit the world is a very, very upsetting and uncomfortable place right now. The difference being that for me, it always has been.
Well, look, the memoir Mother's Boy, it obviously goes back through your life. You were born to a working class family in 1940s Manchester, the great grandson of Lithuanian and Russian immigrants, raised by your mother, grandmother, and Aunt Joyce. The book is it's framed and begun as you lose your mother. Tell me about your mother and her influence on you.
It's a kind of, I think the book, the more I think about it now, though I didn't realise I was writing it that way, is a love letter. It's a love letter to my parents, who I always cared for a lot, but I care for more now they're not here, and now I feel I wasn't as good about them in my mind as I should have been. I had too much of that boyish shame of my parents, of which I am now ashamed. My mother was a terrific woman. She was wholly uneducated. She was born in Manchester. It was her parents and grandparents that came over from Lithuania. But there was no money in those families for kids to stay at school, so she would have left school at 14. She worked in a milliner's, I think, for a while, and she collected for a local Jewish hospital. But she read books. She just picked up books and she read books. Not Jewish books. That generation of Jews had no interest in where they'd come from. They'd never even tell you it was over. It wasn't the silence of Holocaust survivors. They weren't that. There was none of that. None of us. There was nothing terrible in the background like that. But they'd escaped from somewhere 2 generations or 1 generation before, and they wanted to forget it, and they wanted to be English now. And my mother read English poetry and English books and read them aloud. She just read whatever she saw. She was not educated. No one taught her what to read. But she had instinctive good taste. She loved 19th century poetry. She loved Tennyson. She loved Browning. She loved Matthew Arnold. She read these to me. And I think I use a phrase in the memoir that it was she provided the orchestration of my life. And I grew up hearing as much from her as from school or anyone who taught me of literature and English literature, and I grew to love English literature and grew to love the sound of English literature thanks to her.
You write in the book that she sent you off for your first term at Cambridge with a toilet roll in case they'd run out. That's a sort of fantastic Jewish mother sketch. It's almost perfect.
Yes, and she was a fantastic, perfect Jewish mother sketch, and she did send me off like that. And for many years, I have to tell you, I don't know who's listening, but maybe there are people here who know this. For many years, although I laughed at her, I half followed her advice in that I carried things like that, little folded sheets of paper that could be useful in my back pocket for years and years. Because although I laughed at her and said, "Ma, don't be silly, they will have toilet paper in Cambridge." The wonderful thing was the first time I went to a toilet down in College, Cambridge, they had no toilet paper.
I hope you had it with you.
Well, of course I did. And I said, "Thank you, Ma."
Your father also sounds like a hugely colourful character. He was a regimental tailor, an upholsterer, a market stall holder, a taxi driver, a balloonist, and a magician. And he once punched Oswald Mosley's horse in the mouth.
Yes, but not deliberately. He had nothing against horses. He was trying to get regularly Jewish men of my father's generation would come down to London when Mosley was having one of his East London parades, and Jewish men from all over the country would go and try and break these parades up and show that Jews were not going to be trampled on, not again, thank you very much. And my father, who was a strong guy, very short, but he was as wide as he was short, my father. He was enormously wide, and he had hands like sledgehammers. So that horse really felt it, I tell you. But he didn't want to hurt the horse. He aimed for Oswald Mosley, but he was a bit short, so he couldn't quite reach Oswald Mosley. And Oswald Mosley being what he was, dodged reared back on his horse, and the horse copped it. This appeared on television. My mother saw it. She went, "Oi, what's going?" Because he hadn't told her where he'd gone. Where's your dad? Your dad's away for the day. Ma, look what we've just seen on television. And she had to go down and bail him out, really, because he was... apparently you weren't allowed to attack Oswald Mosley, certainly not his horse. So he was apprehended by the police and given a telling off by them, but an even bigger telling off by my mother. But he continued to do this. I mean, he saw it as his job to fight for oppressed Jewish people, and he wasn't going to take any nonsense. And nobody would have crossed. You saw those hands, and it's a pity he's not here now.
Were you proud of that at the time?
Yeah, I was, but sort of abashed by it, really, because I wasn't that kind of... hence the name of my memoir. I was my mother's boy. I was very much in awe of my father and loved him and frightened of him and found him, fantastic material for a writer. How lucky was I? I didn't know it at the time. I used to think, I want a philosopher for a father. I want Kingsley Amis, lucky Martin Amis. He's got Kingsley Amis for a father. And it took me ages to realise, no, you're the lucky one, Howard. You've got a father as various and extraordinary as that. But it took me ages to realise he could be my subject. But I was not my father's boy. My brother was a little bit more my father's boy. But my real father's boy was my sister. My sister was one of the first women taxi drivers in Manchester. If I had trouble with my motor car, I'd go to my sister. How do I fix this? And she'd get onto the car and fix it for him. And I always felt he wished that I, his firstborn, had been... I think I say in the memoir, offered an assortment of children. He would not have chosen me. But he was all right about me. And at the very end, when he was dying, sadly, and he actually said to me, "I'm very proud of you." Very touching. He said, "I'm very proud of you, but I just want to know, you're not going to be a rabbi, are you?" I said, "No, Dad, I'm not going to be a rabbi." Though, 15 years before, he was complaining because I was going out with non-Jewish girls, so... Which way do you want it, Dad?
Parents. I mean, your father had Ukrainian roots. Do you feel that keenly this week?
It's very vexatious. He was from Kamenets-Podolsky in the middle of we called it the Crimea there. And I keep looking out to see if anything is happening to it, but I've not seen it mentioned. For Jews, Crimea is vexed because... we had some bad times there. There's no point pretending we didn't. There were pogroms there. Babi Yar, one of the worst, which has just been bombed, one of the worst of all the Nazi atrocities. There were people from Crimea who collaborated.
There was enthusiastic participation, yes.
So, but the trouble is there was enthusiastic participation in the Nazi project all over Europe.
Yeah.
And if you're going to feel hostile towards it, you might as well feel hostile to the whole of Europe. So I don't feel that, and I have reverted to feeling, well, I come from there. These, to a degree, are my people. But you don't have to feel these are your people to feel what you feel. This is so horrifying. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but everybody else I know feels as I feel, that we're living on the edge of tears all the time. It's almost impossible. And every day now, I do what lots of people do. I put the radio on, I put the television on to see more, what's it called? There's a word for it, isn't it? It's doom
scrolling.
I'm a doom scroller. Yeah. And then I have to stop because it upsets me too much. But it's not just the suffering that's upsetting. It's the irrationality of what we're hearing from the other side. And that idea that for all we've aspired, for all we believe in human perfectibility, and one day human beings will be good and reason will prevail, it clearly won't.
Your novel Jay, you wrote about a society where people sort of deny the past because they don't want to face up to it.
Yes.
I found myself thinking about that a lot, looking at Russia the last week or two.
Yes, it's very frightening. It's very frightening for them, and it's as if that whole Kafka world in which of a world upside down and irrational, in which every instance of black is called white, and you can't penetrate it, and it actually sends you mad. That not quite as much as the suffering which is unbearable to behold or to hear about, but that sheer irrationality and that sense that people can be absolutely silenced and kept in the dark forever is a terrible shock if you come from the liberal West, where we think it's all going to be right one day soon.
Where we think truth will out. Yes, you were 40 years old before your first novel was published, and you said that you write in fact that your writing was held back by your study of other English novelists. You said, since I couldn't be Dickens, I couldn't be anybody. How did you get over that?
You think I can't be Dickens, but I don't want to be nobody. I've got to do something. And in the end, it was having to face the fact that my life was absurdist. It was more absurdist than it was tragic. So the great tragic novels that I wanted to write, I didn't have a tragic story to tell, but I had an absurd story to tell. I was teaching in Wolverhampton Polytechnic, which I'm afraid I was such a snob that I did feel. I was an intellectual snob. I didn't belong there. I belonged in Harvard, Yale or Oxford or back in Cambridge, and I certainly didn't belong in a Polytechnic. Shame on me. For a little while, I did a good job and tried to teach there conscientiously, but it wore me down in the end. I didn't want to live in Wolverhampton. I'd escaped from Manchester once. I had to escape from Manchester and gone around the world lecturing only to end up in Wolverhampton. That was not a journey I'd planned. So I thought, you're a fool, Howard, and your story is a foolish story. It's not War and Peace. It's not Anna Karenina. It's a campus novel. And it's even more absurd than a campus novel because this doesn't even have a campus. So it was that, really. It was the sense of my life being demeaning. I shouldn't have felt demeaned, but I felt demeaned. And I made comedy out of that feeling demeaned and out of the knowledge that I shouldn't have felt demeaned. And it was, I like to think, a very funny novel. In fact, people say, why don't you write another one of those? But, you meant to get on and move on a little bit. But that did it. It got me out right away. It was accepted right away and people liked it right away. And I went from nothing to a little bit of something in a bound.
Gives hope to us all. Look, I wish we had more time. Alas, we don't. But Mother's Boy, Howard Jacobson's new memoir, was published on Thursday, and I can wholeheartedly recommend it. And Howard Jacobson, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure. Pleasure to talk to you.
It's been great to have you. Now, look, as you may know, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky became a politician after the unlikeliest of career changes himself. Previously, he was a stand-up comedian starring in his own sketch show. Now, Channel 4 is showing that series, and in today's Times, our TV reviewer Carol Midgley reviews it. Find out what she makes of it and why she thinks watching it is grotesquely surreal in today's Times. You can pick up a copy of the paper or visit our website or app. You'll need a digital subscription, but if you want to explore what's on offer first, you get your first month absolutely free. But hurry, this offer is only open for the next few days. To find out more and sign up, head to our website at thetimes.co.uk. Our TV review comes up pretty soon. That's and also, of course, with the latest theme tune quiz, and that's right after the latest news and sport.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Good morning. With the headlines, I'm Anna Cunningham. There has been a confused picture emerging this morning from the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol. It's one of two cities in the south where Russia had agreed a temporary ceasefire with Ukraine for 5 hours. The aim was to open up humanitarian corridors, allowing the evacuation of civilians from the city. But locals have reported that Russian shelling was continuing along the evacuation route, and now in the past few minutes it's been announced that the planned evacuation has been suspended for security reasons. It's not yet clear what the picture is in the second city of Volnovakha, where a temporary ceasefire has also been agreed. Earlier, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had urged in a video posted on Facebook that men who can stay and fight.
Those people willing to leave these places should be able to do so now using the humanitarian corridor. But those who can should continue fighting.
In other breaking news this morning, all British nationals who are in Russia, where it's not essential for them to be there, are being asked to leave. The Foreign Office has changed its advice because of Russia's struggling economy, and it says potential issues with getting back to the UK. The Ministry of Defence says Ukraine continues to hold key cities such as Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariupol, but there have been reports of street fighting in Sumy. The MOD says it's highly likely that all 4 cities are now surrounded by Russian forces. And Russia has blocked Facebook and reportedly Twitter and YouTube in the country. The Russian parliament approved a law yesterday that would make it a criminal offence, punishable by up to 15 years in prison, to spread what they say is fake or false news about the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. In other news, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said Shane Warne's family will be offered a state funeral for him. The cricketing legend died at the age of 52 in Thailand yesterday from a suspected heart attack. Cloud and occasional rain in the southeast, moving into central areas of England today. Drier and brighter for parts of East Anglia later, mainly dry with sunny spells elsewhere. Tom Clayton has the sport.
The Russian F1 driver Nikita Mazepin has been dropped by his team Haas for the 2022 season. In a statement, the team says they are shocked and saddened by the invasion of Ukraine and have also ended their title sponsorship of Russian mining firm Uralkali, which is owned by Mazepin's father, Dmitry Mazepin. In a statement, Mazepin says he'll have more to say in coming days, but no process was followed in this unilateral step. Shane Warne has been described as a cricket genius following the news of his passing yesterday. The Melbourne Cricket Ground, a site where Warne produced multiple memorable performances, including against England, will rename their Grand South stand the SK Warne stand in his honour. The former England captain, David Gower, told Times Radio he was a nightmare to play against.
Part of his skill was that ability to, as some have said this morning, instill fear in a batsman. I mean, the fear of being embarrassed. I mean, not just the fear of being got out. The fear of being absolutely embarrassed by this magician. I mean, it was possible to score runs against him. I mean, I would say, in all honesty, yes, I would have hoped to score some runs. And yes, he would have got me out.
The Winter Paralympian Millie Knight says winning another medal was a surprise after adding a second bronze to her career total. Her third place finish in the visually impaired downhill event this morning means she's now won 4 medals in 2 games and GB's first in Beijing.
Like we said, it's something that we never thought we'd achieve again. It's a crazy feeling, and I don't think either of us have fully sort of taken it in yet and absorbed what's actually happening. I think tonight when we get our medals will be very, very special.
And no Premier League football games will be shown in China this weekend over planned displays of unity with Ukraine from all clubs. The Premier League's chief executive, Richard Masters, is also reviewing broadcast contracts in Russia. Here in the UK, you can hear live coverage of all of the Premier League and EFL action over on Talk Sport. Later, you can hear Liverpool host West Ham. That's exclusive to Talk Sports from 5:30.
This is Times Radio.
When you're ready to start planning your next holiday, come and talk with the luxury tailor-made travel experts at Kuoni. Discover why we're a Which recommended provider and offer exceptional flexibility on all holidays. For total peace of mind, trust Kuoni. Atoll protected and Which recommended. Visit kuoni.co.uk or your local store. Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be. Find out more at netwealth.com.
And it is time for our weekly TV review, which as ever starts with a TV theme that I don't know what it is. I never know what it is, and I really don't know what it is. I thought I could have guessed what it was a bit more often than I have done, which is almost never. Anyway, I'm joined this week by the novelist Jenny Colgan, who's helped me review the telly. Hello, Jenny.
Hello, good morning.
How are you?
That was a very jolly piece to see us in. Cheers up a bit.
Don't tell us, but do you know what it was?
Of course not. No, this is a ridiculous game. But I'm cheered in general.
Do you know what? Some people are really good at it, but not people who review telly. Why is that? Anyway, what are we reviewing this week, Jenny?
We have, it's a tricky week anyway, so thank you for giving me a whole bunch of very grim TV. That's helped everything.
Keen to help.
We have the return of Peaky Blinders, the beloved Peaky Blinders, which is back on BBC One. We have the return of Killing Eve, the once beloved and now slightly ambivalent show, which is also back. Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes, which is actual stunning documentary footage that has been lost for a long time and has come to light on Sky. And finally, The Dropout, which is the story of the Theranos fraud. Can I say it is a fraud? Yes, I can.
Yep, you can.
Right. Which is on Disney Plus.
Wonderful. Well, any comments on any of those, get in touch. Text us on 87222. Start your message with the word Times. Tweet us at Times Radio or email us on studio@times.radio. And there's also the contacts to use if you know what the theme tune was at the start of this item, which we will play again pretty shortly. So first up, Jenny, Peaky Blinders. Peaky Blinders, it is series 6 of Tommy Shelby and all the rest being generally gangsters around the place. Let's hear a clip.
Father Christmas got stuck up the chimney again, did he? What ship are you on tomorrow? Oh, the best. Most expensive one. And then we'll get there. And Tommy will say, "Hello, Lizzie. Hello, children," in that dead voice.
Come on, Lizzie. You'll be on holiday. Being away might change him.
That's Peaky Blinders on BBC One. It's on Sunday nights at 9 p.m, or you can catch up on BBC iPlayer. I'm joined this week by Jenny Colgan to review the telly. Jenny, am I right in thinking you hadn't seen Peaky Blinders before?
Well, this has explained a lot to me, particularly my teenager's haircut. Why everybody wears hats now. It's, I've missed this massive cultural event, and it's been really odd coming in, extremely late. And there's been no point this week where I've seen anyone and said, "Oh, I'm watching Peaky Blinders," where it doesn't matter who they are. They go, "Oh, it's great. Oh, it's great." I mean, it's a completely above the board cultural event that I had completely missed. And so I sat down kind of slightly grumpily going, "Oh, right, everybody knows except for me." And then I think by about minute, there's a bit where he's on a very clear transatlantic line home, and his, I think it's his daughter, is having visions, or she's speaking in a Romany tongue. Oh yeah, I was completely hooked. I must know what's going to happen.
So are you going to go back and watch the many previous series?
It's quite odd. Cillian Murphy is such a charismatic actor anyway, and you can see immediately. It's got to that season 6 stage where it's really convoluted and there's a lot of backstory to get through. So possibly not, but I could. And also, if you're coming to it fresh, there's quite a lot of kind of slow-mo rocket walking in the dark that it reminds anyone of my age very much of 1980s music videos. Well, there's lots of doves taking off in slow motion for no reason.
Whenever he walks down a street, somebody is welding. There's always the sound of clanging metal. Even in Newfoundland, who knows why they're clanging metal, but wherever he goes, there is the sound of clanging metal. Would you like me to tell you what's been happening for the past however many years? Will you believe me if I do tell you?
Yes, please do, because at one point someone says, "Oh, well, you never killed Oswald Mosley," or perhaps, so
So
the newcomer.
So basically, you had they were sort of relatively low-level Birmingham gang, sort of ripping off bookies mainly. Tommy Shelby comes back from the war, decides in a sort of Michael Corleone way, is the obvious rising talent rather than his older brother, whose name I forget, who he more or less kind of sort of pushes into a secondary role, and they take control of the sort of Birmingham underground. But I think because they thought this show was only going to have a couple of seasons in it, they take control of it awfully quickly. And by season 3, he's already sitting in the House of Commons as an MP and this sort of new kind of like corrupt industrialist. And then they're kind of like, "Oh no, we've got to keep this going." If you do go back and watch it all, the main thing you've got to look forward to is Tom Hardy as a Hasidic Orthodox Jew, which is as ludicrous as it sounds.
Oh, well, what? Anything with Tom Hardy with weird stuff on his face is very... I don't mean weird stuff. I mean Tom doing anything practically is very watchable. But if he's from Birmingham, why does he sound like he's in EastEnders?
They have slightly reinvented the Birmingham accent in a way, I would say. I mean, you can hear the Birmingham in it a little bit. Helen McCrory's Birmingham accent was always pretty strong, but you do get that sort of, there's a sort of menacing brumminess in Peaky Blinders.
Well, there was a real sense that if she was in it, it must be pretty good. So I was kind of impressed with that. And actually, they have a scene in this first episode where obviously she's died on screen or off where they have a tribute to her and they burn a caravan. I thought that was really good because quite often in long-running serials, if somebody dies, they just replace them with someone that doesn't look at all like them. We all have to just move on. And I thought that was really a very kind of classy thing that they did quite early on.
Peaky Blinders is very flexible in terms of its scripts, in that you can sort of tell they do sort of respond to what's happened to them. I mean, this is an extreme case, obviously, but they do respond in the script to what's happened to the cast. So Tom Hardy got killed off, but then they brought him back. He became a massive star. You've now got what's her name? The woman from the Queen's Gambit, Anna Taylor-Joy. Yeah. She was a very minor character until now, but because she's now a huge star, they've obviously written her up a bit,
I think it's very good to cast the ghost of a famous movie star from 1930 as someone from 1930. I think she's Lana Turner. I think she's so watchable. In fact, I think it's as soon as she turned up, I got over the whole kind of soft rock video thing and started to it because I just think she's amazing.
Okay, well, what's next? Anyway, let's move on from Peaky Blinders. What's next, Jen?
Killing Eve is next.
Yep. Okay. So this is the latest. Is the fourth series, I think, of Jodie Comer being a Russian assassin. Let's hear a clip.
You've been here for months, and we hardly know anything about you.
I was born in Russia, abandoned in an orphanage, then sold into slavery.
You seem more interested in someone seeing you be baptized rather than the baptism itself.
Well, if you're baptized in a forest and nobody sees you getting baptized, are you really baptized?
Do you believe in God?
I believe that the people who believe in God are good people for me to be around.
No, I can't baptize someone who doesn't have faith.
I have faith.
But
no, I have faith. I'm not as inside as some people think I am. And that I can prove them wrong.
So that's Killing Eve, and that's already on the iPlayer, and I think it starts on TV tonight at 9:15 on BBC One. Jenny Colgan, I'm wobbling a bit on Killing Eve. What do you reckon?
Yeah, do you know, that first series was flawless. It was so perfect and it was so great. It was like Heroes. If you make something brilliant, I realise it's very hard to stop making it. And it's watchable.
It's not bad. It's not quite there, is it?
It's not bad. The problem is these days there's so much great telly that being not bad is not quite enough. And I can see they're bringing in the kind of Phoebe vibe with the church and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it very much has that kind of, okay, let's go a little bit priestwards, which I don't know. Even she wears a kind of nice white dress. I don't want to see her in a nice white dress. I want to see her in something completely bananas. She's great. Sandra Oh is great. It's kind of witty occasionally, but I think it's a shadow of the brilliant, fun, exciting show that it was. I think it's treading.
Basically, what you've got now is you've got Villanelle, the assassin. She's trying to be a good person. She's joined a church, as you heard from that clip. She wants to be baptized because she thinks that's going to make her into a better person. She's doing very well at not killing people. Well, Sandra Oh is basically still trying to track down the 12, and I don't remember who the 12 are, and I don't really care. And I think it's very hard to sort of concentrate on the big picture of it. Look, what worried me about this, and I don't know if this is me just being, a bit too sort of sensitive to the times, as it were, but the whole sexy Russian psychopath thing just doesn't. Not only does it not seem fun, it seems kind of like it seems to sort of call us to account for the way that we've allowed this sort of thing to be sort of both titillating and not taken very seriously for quite a long time. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely makes sense. Yeah. It literally opens in Moscow with a hilarious fake assassination attempt. So yeah, exactly, the timing. This is effectively not the show's fault, but it's unpleasant. Can I tell you about something I really like about it though?
Yeah,
is Fiona Shaw is. Fiona Shaw is almost always the best thing in anything she's in anyway. But she plays this dodgy, bored British cultural attaché, who's obviously kind of completely corrupt, and that would be a show.
just her, yeah.
Around. Just her swanning around embassies of the world, getting into trouble. That would be fun. You're right. It's not, in a sense, with Peaky Blinders, I'm not really in the sense for kind of, very violent loner psychopaths that rule the world either this week. It's that kind of thing. But yeah, the Russian angle on Villanelle just makes it even tougher watch if people have fallen off in it.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I do think it's a show that is nearing its conclusion, I would say. Look, here's a quick reminder of our theme tune teaser for today. So, people who've got it wrong so far include Shalini. Oh, Shalini, you got it wrong this week. She said it's Steptoe and Son, and it's not. John in Maida Vale said Call My Bluff. Sean said Bullseye. People who've got it right include Eric Brune and Paul, who says Genius Series. How come none of you people know this? I don't know, Paul. We just don't. The answer to come shortly, as well as reviews of Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes, and The Dropout. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio in association with NetWealth. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Mariella Meets on Times Radio. Listen to the new podcast from Times Radio, where Mariella talks to a host of big names from the worlds of politics, entertainment, culture, and the arts.
Each week I'll be bringing you a selection of the best interviews from our favourite guests, movers and shakers from the worlds of art and entertainment, politics, business, music, and wider society.
Mariella Meets on Times Radio.
Intimate, in-depth talk with pioneering talents and fascinating folk discussing the stuff that matters to them and how they scaled the slippery slopes of success.
Mariella Meets is now available as a podcast. Listen for free on the Times Radio app.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. Tonight's £20 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play on app, online and in-store. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio with Hugo Rifkind.
And that's our theme for the week. And I'm joined by Jenny Colgan reviewing the telly. Jenny, any idea yet what we're listening to?
Some John Key quiz of some kind. Am I getting closer?
And so the first right answer was Barbican Matt, and he said, of course, it is Rising Damp. I don't feel that bad about not getting it. I'm not sure I was ever quite a Rising. I think I was maybe a little bit too young for Rising Damp. Did you watch Rising Damp, Jen?
That's a kind of sad guy that is a landlord, isn't it?
Exactly, that's the one. Yeah,
and you're meant to be sympathetic towards a landlord. How do times have changed?
Hero landlord with terrible. Yeah, he was had lots of tenants in a rundown house. And sort of Basil Fawlty in a way, but in a more landlordy type way. Anyway, well done, Barbican Matt. You win, we lose again. What are we talking about next, Jen?
Oh, Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes.
Oh yes, this is on Sky Documentaries and Now, and it's basically the documentary that covers exactly what the drama series Chernobyl covered, and with lots of very familiar footage in that respect. Let's hear a clip.
What has been remarkable is how much the Soviet people, in spite of all the evidence, still seem to be believing the fairy stories the government is still telling them.
Well, could it be argued, Martin, that only the Soviet Union could have kept a lid on what might have been a situation of public panic? Only a totalitarian state could have got away with it.
I'm not sure they have got away with it.
So that's Chernobyl, The Lost Tapes. That's on Sky Documentaries and Now. And it's largely in Russian with subtitles, but that's an excerpt that's from British TV at the time as featured in the documentary. Jenny Colgan, what did you think?
Oh, shucks. Oh, my God. Do you know, I was watching it on my laptop and there's a little button that they have, and I don't know if they have it for everything, and it said, watch something else? Question. And my sense was that it stayed up the whole time and that they'd left it as an escape route. The two things that really stand out is if you saw the drama and you already knew the drama was good, you can't believe how good the drama was, because some of it is completely indistinguishable from real footage. You get huge respect for the people that dug this stuff up. It's astonishing to feel how recent it was. You know, it's all in colour. It's not ancient footage, and then it's devastating. And the awful thing about it, just as a warning for people watching it, is it's a bit like Threads, which is every time you think it might get worse, it gets worse. And by the end of it, you're in maternity hospital. So just be really, really careful. I wouldn't have made it, honestly, if I wasn't reviewing it. It's a brilliant feat of unearthing. It's an astonishing record of what happened. And also the way the drama, if you remember the drama at the end, what they did was they went back and they said, well, here's so-and-so who's still alive, and here's the child of so-and-so. And Chernobyl really led to the end of the Soviet Union. it left you with a faint feeling of hopefulness. This doesn't. This destroys you, especially in light of everything. It just says everything was awful. They lied and they lied and they lied and they're still lying. And guess what? We're still in the situation that we were in 1987.
Well, I mean,
it's a brilliant piece of filmmaking. I would really, really warn people about watching it.
I mean, the fact that it came out this week when we are again worrying about a nuclear power station in Ukraine is just sort of astonishing. We've had an email while we're talking from Robert Harvey. He says, amazing programme with content that demonstrates how little has changed in Russian state thinking over the years. There's so much in this programme that echoes the events in Ukraine today. And it's quite true that basically the disinformation and the denial and all that kind of stuff. So I was really struck by, just how aesthetically similar the drama was to it, having seen the drama. You just sort of see that's where everything came from, how painstaking it was. So things that I was a bit more wobbly about, I'd say, were the way that the town that the power station was in was portrayed as such a sort of paradise beforehand. And I bet it wasn't that nice. It was a Soviet town with a nuclear power station in it. I find it hard to believe it was quite this kind of sort of,
I completely disagree with that. You do. I come from a family that went from slums to high rises and thought that the high rises were paradise. It was much, much nicer, I think, than anywhere else.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's necessarily somewhere you would want to live just by comparison. And actually, what I noticed in the drama and the documentaries, they're constantly having really nice weather. Did you notice that?
Oh, yeah. I guess that. I also thought, very, very briefly before we move on, I also thought something that the drama did so well was explain the technically what had happened. How the rods had got stuck in and how the plant had malfunctioned, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't exactly so much a failing, but they just didn't really go there in this. This was more about the consequences and the aftermath. And I felt I understood it much better having seen the drama. Anyway, we should move on. Sorry.
I think you should watch both. I strongly think. But also what young Russian boys will do for very, very little is chilling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's such bravery there. Anyway, look, what's next, Jen?
Oh, the dropout, thank goodness. Oh.
mere fraud.
Mere fraud. They took people's money for silly reasons. In fact, even that whole idea of these gods of science and tech. So it's about Elizabeth Holmes, who wanted to be one of these, she wanted to be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. And so she kind of made up this thing and they couldn't do it. And they managed to raise billions of dollars for a thing that never worked, that could never work. Yeah. It is a wonderfully done drama. It's not very pomo. There's not a lot of flashback. There's no talking to camera. It's very straightforward. Everyone in it is kind of good looking. And one of my favorite things is that she had this kind of very creepy sidekick, Sonny, who also ended in court and all the rest of it. And he was this very dodgy older guy she got involved with who she had this very complex thing with. And he's played by Navina Andrews. Navina, he's like literally one of the most beautiful men that's ever been born. There's a kind of Disneyfication element to that.
But I mean, it works in both directions. I mean, so I thought that this was going to be rubbish when I heard that it was Amanda Seyfried playing the lead, because she's one of the most beautiful women in the world. And I just thought she was a strange choice in the role, but she manages to sort of embody, I think almost slightly because she's slightly miscast, she manages to embody that kind of sort of Theresa May awkwardness that Elizabeth Holmes had. You know what I mean?
I think she's fantastic. I'm loving it. I just went straight into this, really undemanding. There's none of this, who's doing what, when kind of stuff. No, they just pretty much do things in the order that they happened. You know what's going to happen, but also by episode 2, when they're trying to get it to work, it's so you really want it to work. You keep forgetting that these are the bad guys.
Yeah,
you really want them to succeed. You really want this clever idea to happen. It's well done. It's not particularly original. It's not particularly out there. I enjoyed it more than anything that I've seen this week.
I mean, I like the way that they allow her to be. They basically allow her to be brilliant, right? Because she's not just a fraud. She's a missed opportunity. She's somebody with incredible drive and ambition who had a brilliant idea and it just didn't work, and then she gets caught in the web of lies because it doesn't work.
Oh, the cult of these men. I mean, the Airbnb guy makes same. He was brilliant. He had a fantastic business, and then he ruined it by going for billions rather than millions. And she's exactly the same. It's so interesting. It's a real story for our times, or a story for what used to be our times. Honestly, the fact a true crime drama is now my escapism says a lot about where we are.
No, that does say a lot. Look, very briefly, Jen, what are you looking forward to this coming week? What's next? What TV? Obviously, rather than just in life.
Watch
yeah.
I'm going to sneak off and watch the Married at First Sight new series. That is it. That is my level of what I can handle at the moment.
Do you know what? I've never watched Married at First Sight. Should I?
Oh, yes. No, obviously, but, yes.
Why? Tell me about it.
Because they film so much, it's so endless that you get absolutely people at their most vulnerable, and however much they come in being kind of big guy of their town, they end up completely exposed. It's like Big Brother used to be.
Oh, magnificent!
It's cracking.
Okay, yeah. I'm sold. Thanks very much indeed, Jenny Colgan. Thanks for reviewing the telly with me this week. Speak to you again very soon.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Hugo Rifkind, and this is Times Radio. Coming up in the next half hour, I'll be speaking to the Ukrainian novelist Andrei Kirkov on life inside the war-torn country, and I'll be speaking to the award-winning crime writer Anne Cleeves on her latest novel. But first, let's get a roundup of the latest news with Anna Cunningham.
Hugo, thank you. Good afternoon. Britons in Russia have been advised by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to leave the country if it's not essential that they stay. In a change to travel advice issued in the past hour, Britons are now being told to leave Russia by remaining commercial routes. The advice is now against all travel to the whole of Russia and is said to be due to the lack of available flight options to return to the UK and the increased volatility in the Russian economy. Meanwhile, the planned evacuation of civilians from the southern Ukrainian port city of Mariupol has been suspended. It comes after Russia announced this morning that it had agreed a temporary ceasefire in Mariupol and Volnovakha for 5 hours, but locals say Russia had not abided by the planned temporary ceasefire, with shelling continuing along the evacuation route out of Mariupol. It made it impossible for people to leave. It's not yet clear what the picture is in the second city of Volnovakha, where a temporary ceasefire had also been agreed. Earlier, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had urged in a video posted on Facebook that men who can stay should do so and fight.
Those people willing to leave these places should be able to do so now using the humanitarian corridor. But those who can should continue fighting.
And in a post by the Ukrainian parliament, it's reported that the Russian military has said not to adhere to the regime of silence and continues the shelling of Mariupol. And the Ukrainian parliament says the evacuation of civilians is suspended for security reasons, but currently there are negotiations ongoing with the Russian Federation to establish a regime of silence and ensure a safe humanitarian corridor. The Times war correspondent Anthony Lloyd is in Dnipro.
Well, it's hard to think of a example of any Russian commitment so far that should have earned trust. However, that said, it is in Russia's interests to allow cities which it's trying to attack and capture to be drained of the civilian population first. It makes things much easier. If you lay siege to a city, it gives a lot of men and women no option but to fight. But if you open a safe corridor and say you can go, a lot of them, particularly those women and children, will leave. So there is a strategic necessity or attraction for Russia to declare a ceasefire in these two cities.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused NATO of giving the green light to the bombing of Ukrainian cities and villages. It comes after NATO leaders yesterday ruled out implementing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said the alliance had made what he called the painful decision. Speaking on Times Radio, Sir Kim Darroch, a former national security advisor, said that implementing a no-fly zone could result in more harm than good.
First of all, no-fly zones are extraordinarily difficult to implement. Second, once you declare it, you have to enforce it, and that does mean NATO planes engaging with Russian planes. It does mean NATO going to war with Russia, and I just don't see any NATO country calling for that.
More than 1 million people are said to have now fled Ukraine. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, who's in Moldova, says the figure is rising.
I think that by tonight, latest tomorrow, the total number of people that have crossed out of Ukraine will reach 1.5 million. I think Poland yesterday saw in one day alone 100,000 people crossing. So it's going exponentially.
And rallies are taking place in several cities in the UK and Ireland today in anger at Russia's invasion of Ukraine. People are gathering in London, Glasgow and Manchester, among other places this lunchtime, as well as Belfast and Dublin this afternoon. In other news, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said Shane Warne's family will be offered a state funeral for him. The cricketing legend died at the age of 52 in Thailand yesterday from a suspected heart attack. A look at the weather. Clouds and occasional rain in the southeast will move into central areas of England later. Elsewhere, a mainly dry afternoon with some sunny spells. Our top sports story this hour. Russian Formula One driver Nikita Mazepin has been dropped by his team Haas for the 2022 season. In a statement, the team said they're shocked and saddened by the invasion of Ukraine. They've not yet confirmed who will replace him in the team. We'll have a full sports roundup at past.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app and via your smart speaker.
Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be.
Hello, this is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio. It is 12:05. Very good afternoon to you, and good afternoon as well if you're listening to me on your way to a demonstration, because I believe the demonstration about Russian action in Ukraine in Trafalgar Square started at 12 o'clock. So a particular greeting to anyone heading there. I'm with you until 1 p.m. when Alexis Conran opens the trapdoor he has installed beneath my chair and I get reacquainted with the disabled toilet on the floor below. Hopefully this week it'll be empty. But still to come before then, the award-winning crime writer Anne Cleeves will be talking about her latest book, The Heron's Cry. The comedian Sarah Kendall will be chatting about Series 2 of her Sky comedy drama Frayed. We'll have the latest political analysis from Caroline Wheeler of the Sunday Times. We'll have a personal finance strip from the Times Tables. You can, of course, get involved. You can text us on 87222, start your message with the word Times, tweet us at Times Radio, or email us on studio@times.radio. And look, we're aware that some of you listening on DAB this morning are having a few problems with the audio. We're sorry about that, and we're working to get it fixed as soon as possible. Although I believe online we are still fine. It's a good opportunity, of course, to let you know that there are lots of ways to listen on our app, online, and on your smart speaker. So if you're having trouble, try another. In a moment, we'll be hearing from Ukrainian novelist Andrei Kurkov, who'll be discussing the latest situation there, as well as his own safety after he was tipped off that he's on Russia's wanted list. The main news about the war in Ukraine this morning is that Russia's military will observe a ceasefire in 2 areas of Ukraine to allow civilians to evacuate Mariupol and Volnovka. Sorry, forgive me. Here's what Jerome Starkey, the defence editor for The Sun, told Times Radio about that earlier.
Whilst the news has been welcomed because refugees are desperate to flee Mariupol, it's clearly been greeted with that scepticism as well. And it's only a 5-hour window, and it's a 4-hour journey really from Mariupol to safety, and that doesn't necessarily account for the time it may take the Russian forces to sort of filter those vehicles, to search those vehicles. We don't know what processes are going to be in place. And the distances in this country are huge. So for those refugees to get somewhere that is considered safe, and I say safe in inverted commas, because nowhere is really safe here at the moment, it's going to be a huge undertaking.
Last night, the Director General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, echoed Western leaders in saying that a no-fly zone over Ukraine was a no-go. Inna Sovsun, Ukraine deputy opposition leader for the Holos Party, told Times Radio Breakfast that the West was betraying Ukraine.
The West truly can help right now. And frankly speaking, we were hoping for the West to help us. Because let me remind everyone that in 1994, Ukraine had nuclear weapon. We voluntarily gave that up in exchange for assurances of our security from the United Kingdom, from the United States. And we are not getting that right now. So we do feel betrayed, because had we still have in possession the nuclear weapon, the situation would have been different. But we did give that up. We were hoping that this would mean that the West will support us in case of need. But we are not getting the support that we were expecting to have. That is why, yes, it does feel like a betrayal, and it does feel like the West is not doing nearly enough to stop the murders of the Ukrainian people.
Meanwhile, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office are now advising British nationals whose presence in Russia is not essential to consider leaving Russia by remaining commercial routes. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrei Kurkov, one of the most famous novelists in Ukraine. His book, Death and the Penguin, is well known around the world. Kurkov has been a fierce critic of Putin, and he's received information that he is wanted by the Russians. Andrei Kurkov, welcome to the programme.
Hello. Hi.
Thanks very much indeed for being with us. Look, you lived in central Kyiv until the war began, and then you made a decision to move from the city and keep moving. Tell me about that.
Well, we were woken up on 24th of February by explosions at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then there were two more explosions at 6. And then we just went around to see what is happening. And we're checking on the shelters in the vicinity, and we're in touch with our friends. Nobody could believe that the war has really started, yeah. And we stayed next night with our friend, who is a British writer and journalist living in Kyiv, Lily Hyde, who is a specialist on history of Crimean Tatars, and she was involved in helping Crimean Tatars very much. So she said that actually the underground parking near her house is very safe, and it will be open in case of the bombardments. But we didn't use it. We just spent a night with her, and then we decided with my wife to go to our village house 60 miles away to the west. Our children were at that time in Lviv on holiday. Our daughter came from London specially for this trip, because Lviv is a wonderful medieval city with lots of cafes and restaurants. But first we decided to go to the Karisat house, and we picked up our friend with her son on the way. It was a very long drive because there was a traffic jam all the way to the village. So instead of 1 hour, it took us 4.5 hours to get to the village. And when we took all the belongings, all the luggage and our friends' luggage and them into the house and showed them to their room, I got a phone call saying that I should go further west. And we wanted to leave our friend with her son in the house, but she refused bluntly, and we traveled together to Lviv. It's the distance about 30 miles from our village house, but it took us 22 hours. And meantime, I slept 2 hours on the way, and there were lots of people traveling for second day running with Donetsk and Lugansk even number plates. And these were the 2 times refugees who actually, after the beginning of the war in Donbass, they moved to other cities on the Ukrainian-controlled territory, and now they were moving again to the western Ukraine. Wow. So finally, we made it to Lviv, and that's the journey.
You've been a big critic of Vladimir Putin, indeed a critic of his whole style of government in your books and your other writings, and you've learned now that you're on a Russian wanted list. People they want to get hold of.
I don't know this for sure. I mean, this is. I didn't receive any official document that I'm on the blacklist. My books were on blacklist already twice, and last time actually from April 2014.
Sure. Okay. I mean, do you think it's likely that you would be targeted?
I mean, I will not be tolerated anyway. I mean, I don't know if I'm to be imprisoned or to be done a different way with. But I mean, there are many people who are criticizing and were criticizing Putin in Ukraine, and most of the intellectuals were anti-Putin all their lives. So I mean, it doesn't make sense to talk about my situation. I mean, we should talk about the situation the Ukraine finds itself in.
Yeah, understood. But I mean, through your books, you've helped a lot of people to understand a government by oligarchy, basically, and how that sort of corruption sets in. I mean, you must have considered. Did you consider the new Ukraine to be an antidote to that, moving away from that style of government?
Well, it was moving slowly away, but I mean, Ukraine is a very specific country with a mentality of individualists. So, I mean, if Russians have one and the same image of Great Russia in their heads, Ukrainians, each one has a separate and different image of Ukraine. And as a result, I mean, we have around 400 political parties registered in the Ministry of Justice. I mean, we have real democracy, but with a huge influence of organized anarchy, which was traditional for Ukraine in 16th, 17th century, when Ukraine was independent territory ruled by elected hetmans, who were actually military chefs and heads of territory. So, I mean, this makes us different. I mean, I'm ethnic Russian. I grew up in Ukraine. I'm psychologically and mentally Ukrainian. When I was last time in 2013 in Russia, I spoke the same language to my colleagues and to other people in Penza, or no, it was in Perm, in central Russia, Ural Mountains. And I had a feeling that I'm talking to extraterrestrials because, I mean, they were speaking the same language but meaning different things, using the same words as I did.
Right. Yeah. Look, you're 60 years old now, I believe. So you could leave if you wanted to.
I'm over 60.
You're not required by Ukrainian law to join the army and fight. But what will you do? Will you stay in Ukraine?
We are staying in Ukraine. We are staying in Western Ukraine, and we are trying to be useful. I mean, my older son is organizing exits and cars for people who are trying to leave Kyiv. I'm writing articles and giving interviews and sharing the information I receive from different cities. I'm on the phone every day with many of my friends. Some of them are now under occupied territory, on the occupied territory, for example, in Melitopol or Novaya Kakhovka. So, I mean, there is a lot of things I can do.
Well, I mean, so this morning we've heard about a couple of ceasefires allowing people to evacuate in Mariupol and elsewhere. What's your reaction to that?
Oh, well, I mean, we need ceasefire and we need evacuation of Mariupol. I think 200,000 people who live there want to leave the city because the city is practically half destroyed. And I want to underline that actually people who are killed, the civilians who are killed in Kharkiv, near Kyiv, in Bila Tserkov, in Sumy, Chernigiv, Melitopol, they are all Russian speakers and many of them are ethnic Russians. So, I mean, Putin is coming to defend Russian speakers and Russians from Ukrainian Nazis. I mean, there are no Ukrainian Nazis. There are nationalistic political parties which are not even represented in the parliament because nobody votes for them.
Yeah, sure. What do you think of news as well that NATO has confirmed that there won't be a no-fly zone? Do you think is that right? Is that forgivable? What's your view there?
Well, I mean, the history will say what does it mean. I mean, it means that actually Europe and the world can watch quietly, standing aside as Ukrainian civilians are killed and cities and towns are destroyed and burned down. I mean, we have already several universities destroyed, opera theater in Kharkiv, Philharmonic Hall in Kharkiv destroyed, maternity hospitals, etc. I mean, if Europe and the world is prepared to collect the videos which are available on YouTube of all the atrocities done by Russian army, then, I mean, it is in the future responsibility of NATO and European countries and the United States of America.
Yeah, I understand that. What do you from a Russian perspective? From Vladimir Putin's perspective, why is this happening? What is his motivation for this conflict? What does he want?
Well, I mean, he got more motivation actually when he signed documents with Lukashenko and practically announced that Belarus will become a federal district of Russia. They call it unified states. But I mean, that's his dream to recreate Soviet Union. And now when he got old very quickly, and he spent 2 years in bunker being afraid of a virus, I mean, he went completely berserk. And now he wants to manage to recreate Soviet Union before he dies, to leave this legacy to Russian people and to be remembered in the school books on history as somebody who restored great superpower of Russian Empire or of the Soviet Union. That's his motivation.
Yeah. So Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine, you had previously criticised his lack of professional political expertise and his lack of delivery on his electoral promises. But how's your view of him changed in this crisis?
Well, I mean, he is behaving now in a proper stately way. I mean, I will criticize him also later when Ukraine defends its independence and will survive. But now, I mean, he is showing an example what a real statesman should do and how should one behave. So the government and the president are in place, and this actually keeps not only this, but this also keeps morale high among the Ukrainian population.
How much do you think Russians are aware of what's happening in Ukraine, and how can they be made more aware?
They don't know anything, and from today they have no access to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other sources. So, I mean, they are isolated. The Russian government is isolating Russians from receiving information. So, I mean, but they were already hypnotized before because, I mean, they have one-party system and only one way of information from all the TV channels. So, I mean, it is difficult to talk to them, difficult to reach them, but those who understand something are now in the lines and queues on Finnish border trying to leave Russia, including Alla Pugacheva, famous Soviet and Russian singer with her family. So, I mean, they don't want to remain in the prison which is created by Putin.
Yeah, understood. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us, and we of course all here wish you all the best. That is Andrei Kirkov speaking from Ukraine. So thanks very much indeed for being with us. I should let you know, look, Aisha Hazarika is here from 4 p.m. with Times Radio Drive, and among her guests on the war in Ukraine are Sir Christopher Mayer, the former British ambassador to the United States and Germany, and Lord Ricketts, the former UK permanent representative to NATO. Also, ahead of International Women's Day, Aisha has an exclusive interview with the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. Rayner discusses her feminism, her relationship with Keir Starmer, and her unorthodox approach to preparing for PMQs. That's on Times Radio Drive tonight from 6 p.m. with Aisha. Next up on this programme, I'll be speaking to the award-winning crime writer Anne Cleeves. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio in association with NetWealth. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Aisha Hazarika, this afternoon from 4 on Times Radio.
We'll bring you the very latest from the conflict in Ukraine. I'll be speaking to a local MP live in Kyiv and the former ambassador to the US, Sir Christopher Mayer. And 1 year on from the murder of Sarah Everard, I'll be examining whether progress has been made on tackling violence against women and girls. And ahead of International Women's Day, I've got an exclusive sit-down interview with the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner. We discuss her brand of feminism, her relationship with Keir Starmer, and her rather unorthodox approach to preparing for PMQs.
Aisha Hazarika, this afternoon from 4 on Times Radio.
When you're ready to start planning your next holiday, come and talk with the luxury tailor-made travel experts at Kuoni. Discover why we're a Which recommended provider and offer exceptional flexibility on all holidays. For total peace of mind, trust Kuoni at or protected and Which recommended. Visit kuoni.co.uk or your local store. Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Hello, this is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio. It is 21 minutes past 12, and I'm delighted now to be joined by the award-winning crime writer Anne Cleeves, whose latest novel, The Heron's Cry, sees her amongst the Sunday Times bestsellers as usual. Anne is the creator of the popular detectives Vera Stanhope, Jimmy Perez and Matthew Venn, who can be found in television adaptations Vera, Shetland and The Long Call, respectively. The Heron's Cry is the second of her Two Rivers series, set in North Devon, which features Detective Venn. Anne Cleeves, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
Thanks very much for being with us. Look, like a sort of successful pop group, I guess it would be alarming for you if you weren't at or near the top of the charts, but does that add an extra level of pressure whenever a new book comes out?
Well, not for me, because for most of my writing career, I wasn't anywhere near the charts, so it's just a lovely surprise whenever it happens. And really, it's more about the team that you have behind you. So I've got a wonderful publisher who do all the marketing and the sales and all that stuff, and I just write the books. Mm-hmm. And don't worry about them.
What a lovely life! Tell us about Matthew Venn, then the protagonist of the Heron's Cry, and what makes him a great central character.
Well, I love writing about him, and he came about. I decided that I would finish writing about Shetland, and I'd been alternating between Shetland and Vera for quite a while. And I wanted to do something new. And the move to North Devon was triggered because my husband died quite unexpectedly, and I just wanted to run away from the northeast, from Vera Land, where I live. I went to stay with an old school friend in North Devon because that's where I lived when I was growing up. And really it was just chatting to her because she'd grown up in quite a restricted evangelical religious community, and chatting about our childhoods and how we survived them. And it seemed to me that if you lost your faith in your late teens, as lots of people do, you would have been cast out by that community. And somebody who'd grown up with that sense of duty and honour and perhaps being a little bit special and a little bit different might turn to the police service as a way of refinding a sort of sense of family. So that's how Matthew Venn started. And then he's gay, and that happened really because the two people who looked after me after Tim died, who scooped me up from the hospital and fed me wine and tea and let me cry on their shoulders, were this lovely gay couple who've been great friends of ours for years and years. And so I suppose they were rattling around in my head. So Matthew became gay with a happy marriage to his husband, Jonathan. And that, of course, worked fine for the plot because reconciliation with his family and with the community would be quite tricky if you were a gay man.
When you create these sort of very identifiable with characters, Matthew Venn, Vera, Jimmy Perez, how does it work for you? Do you spend a lot of time with them thinking about who they're going to be before you start writing, or do you just start writing and see what they become?
A bit of both, really. They're rattling around in my head for a little while before I start, so I do have some vague sense of them. But they become sharper and clearer, and I flesh them out as I'm writing.
Is it true that you don't know how your books are going to end when you start writing them?
I don't really know how they're going to begin when I start writing them. No, I don't have a clue. I think it was because, as I've said, I was 20 years writing unpublished without any commercial success. So it had to be fun. And really, if you knew how a book was going to end, there didn't seem a lot of point writing it, or writing it would then become a chore, I suppose. So I love that slight scariness of not knowing how it's going to end and seeing if I can work it out as I go.
Do you sometimes surprise or indeed worry yourself with how it looks like they're going to end?
Oh, about 2/3 of the way through is always a nightmare because it's like wading through blancmange, and you've got to work out exactly what happened and who the killer is and what the relationships are, because we don't really do the same sort of tidy endings these days as they did in the golden age, Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers. But I do need some form of resolution at the end, and some, especially in these really dark times, the sort of books that I read, and I think people turn to them for some sense of order restored and the end of quite so much chaos. And 2/3 of the way through, I don't have a clue. And that's when I panic and go for long walks on the beach. And long train journeys are really good because you don't have to do anything except sit there and try and work through plot strands.
There was quite a degree of interest when The Long Call was adapted by ITV as sort of Primetime's first gay male detective. Were you surprised that was the focus?
Yeah, it was really, because we've moved on a bit, haven't we? And I thought I'd written some interesting characters. I think the team were brilliant, so they did make every effort to get it right. So Ben Aldridge, who plays Matthew Venn, is a gay man who actually had a similar sort of upbringing to Matthew in the novel. And there was a gay director who had very firm ideas about what he wanted to do with the show. And I think it ended up looking absolutely stunning. And although some bits of plot are changed and missed, the essence of the novel was very much there. And it's the same team who make all three, who make Vera, Shetland and The Long Call. And I think that's what they do. They somehow manage to get the essence of the book into popular television drama, which is is quite a feat, really.
I have to ask you about Shetland. It's a place I've only been there once. I went there before the Brexit referendum, but I absolutely fell in love with it. I've been meaning to go back ever since. How important is location to you when you come? I mean, do you go to a new place and become captivated by it and think, who can I kill here?
No, not quite. I'm too lazy for that. They're all places that I know. So I do know Shetland very well. I first lived and worked there in 1975, went back in 76 and worked there. And I've been going back ever since, and I have great friends there, and so I know it very well. I live in the northeast in Vera territory, and I grew up in North Devon. But location is immensely important. I always start with place. I think characters and story very much grow out of the place where they're born. So I can't imagine Vera having been born anywhere but the Northumberland Hills and having that long view and that big sky and that absolutely deciding that she's not going to take any messing about from anyone. And Jimmy Perez could only really have been born on Fair Isle, which is the isle that I know best in Shetland. But come back to Shetland. Come back, because it's absolutely brilliant, and the people there will welcome you with open arms.
I must, but you know what? It was the middle of June when I went there, and I think if I went there in January, it might kill me.
It's very dark.
It's very different. Dark. I definitely saw the best of it. Look, there have been 11 series of Vera on ITV. How much pride and ownership do you feel when adaptations do so well, or do you sort of feel slightly like they're being taken away from you?
Oh, I don't feel they're taken away from me. I feel very proud. One of my, a couple of moments of pride really was when they started filming Vera all those years ago, and the production office was in the old Swan Hunter shipyard building, and so that was great because I did feel that I was bringing a bit of work, a bit of employment, showcasing this brilliant region that I've adopted as my own. So that was wonderful. And then after COVID, when the team came back to film, there is such affection for the show here. And it was almost a sense of things will be all right because Vera's back, because Brenda's back. And people just that sense of belonging, really, when the whole team comes back and starts filming again. And they start filming again very soon for the Series 12, which is astounding.
Wonderful. Look, before I let you go, what's next from the pen and or computer of Anne Cleeves? What's coming up?
A new Vera. A new Vera called The Rising Tide, which will be out in September.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we'll all look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed, Anne Cleeves. How wonderful of you to join us, and good luck with the new book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure. Look, before the news, here's a quick personal finance tip this week from George Nixon, who's been scanning the best buy tables on your behalf.
Times Tables with Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be. Find out more at netwealth.com.
We've been writing about building societies a lot recently, and it's been another busy week for them and for their savers. Coventry Building Society has put up rates on 92% of its adult savings accounts after the last two rises in the Bank of England base rate. Those changes came into force on Tuesday. Its top easy access account now pays 0.6%. It's not the best rate, but it is very competitive. This week also saw rate changes across other big societies come into force at the start of March. It means most of them have put up rates on the vast majority of their accounts. There's just one which hasn't, Nationwide, the biggest. It's only put up rates on 16% of its adult accounts. The highest paying rate on the entire market, meanwhile, is now 0.8% from Synergy Bank.
Times Tables with Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
With the news headlines at 12:30, I'm Nick Ellaby. Good afternoon. Ukrainian authorities say Russia is not observing a temporary ceasefire that was agreed to let civilians leave the southern cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha. The planned evacuation has been suspended. The Ukrainian parliament says Russia has continued shelling, but talks with the Russian Federation are ongoing. Mariupol, a key southern port, has been besieged by Russian forces for days. It's not yet clear what the picture is in Volnovakha, some 40 miles to the north. Earlier, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged in a video posted on Facebook men who can to stay and fight. His words are translated.
Those people willing to leave these places should be able to do so now, using the humanitarian corridor. but those who can should continue fighting.
Meanwhile, Russia's foreign minister has accused Ukrainian peace negotiators of being unprepared and unwilling to speak in a third round of talks. Sergei Lavrov has also accused President Zelensky of attempting to provoke the USA and Europe into getting involved in the war. All British nationals who are in Russia are being asked to leave if it's not essential for them to be there. The Foreign Office has changed its advice because of Russia's struggling economy and potential issues getting back to the UK. The Ministry of Defence says Ukraine continues to hold control of the key cities of Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mariupol, but there has been reports of street fighting in Sumy. The MOD says it's highly likely that all four cities are surrounded by Russian forces. It also says Russian forces are advancing on the southern port city of Mykolaiv. Russia has blocked Facebook and reportedly Twitter and YouTube in the country. The Russian parliament approved a law yesterday that would make it a criminal offence, punishable by up to 15 years in prison, to spread what they say is fake or false news about the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. In other news, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said Shane Warne's family will be offered a state funeral for him. The cricketing legend died aged 52 in Thailand yesterday from a suspected heart attack. Cold with occasional rain in the southeast, moving into central areas of England. Drier and brighter for parts of East Anglia this afternoon. Dry with sunny spells elsewhere. With the sports, here's Tom Clayton.
The Russian F1 driver Nikita Mazepin has been dropped by his team Haas for the 2022 season. In a statement, the team says they are shocked and saddened by the invasion of Ukraine and have also ended their title sponsorship of Russian mining firm Uralkali, which is owned by Mazepin's father, Dmitry Mazepin. In a statement, Mazepin says he'll have more to say in coming days, but no process was followed in this unilateral step. Shane Warne has been described as a cricket genius following the news of his passing yesterday. The Melbourne Cricket Ground, a site where Warne produced multiple memorable performances, including against England, will rename their Grand South stand the SK Warne stand in his honour. The former England captain, David Gower, told Times Radio he was a nightmare to play against.
Part of his skill was that ability to, as some have said this morning, instill fear in a batsman. I mean, the fear of being embarrassed. I mean, not just the fear of being got out. The fear of being absolutely embarrassed by this magician. I mean, it was possible to score runs against him. I mean, I would say, in all honesty, yes, I would have hoped to score some runs. And yes, he would have got me out.
The Winter Paralympian Millie Knight says winning another medal was a surprise after adding a second bronze to her career total. Her third-place finish in the visually impaired downhill event this morning means she's now won 4 medals in 2 games, and GB's first in Beijing.
Like we said, it's something that we never thought we'd achieve again. It's a crazy feeling, and I don't think either of us have fully taken it in yet and absorbed what's actually happening. I think tonight when we get our medals will be very, very special.
And no Premier League football games will be shown in China this weekend over planned displays of unity with Ukraine from all clubs. The Premier League's chief executive, Richard Masters, is also reviewing broadcast contracts in Russia. Here in the UK, you can hear live coverage of all of the Premier League and EFL action over on Talk Sport. Later, you can hear Liverpool host West Ham. That's exclusive to Talk Sports from 5:30.
This is Times Radio.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. Tonight's £20 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play on app, online and in-store. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Account terms, rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with NetWealth. Wealth management as it should be. Find out more at netwealth.com.
Hello, this is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio. Thanks for being with me. It is 12:36 and quite a lot of seconds. We're aware that some of you listening on DAB are having a few problems with the audio this morning. Well, this afternoon now. We're sorry about that. We're working to get it fixed as soon as possible. Do remember there are other ways to listen on our app, online and on your smart speaker. So give them a go if it's stuttering for you. In a few minutes' time, I'll be speaking to the Australian comedian and Taskmaster Series 11 champion Sarah Kendall about her Sky comedy drama Frayed. But if so far in the show you have missed Anne Cleeves on her latest writer's Matthew Venbuck, Howard Jacobson on his memoir, the Ukrainian novelist Andrei Kirkov on what's happening in his country, analysis from Caroline Philp in Kyiv, Alistair Barry and Rachel Cunliffe on the News Review, or Jenny Colgan on this week's TV, then don't forget you can listen back to this show via the Times Radio website. This programme itself becomes available just after 1 p.m. But first, we're living in a material world, and here's a material girl. It's Alexis Conran. He's here to tell me what's coming up on his show after 1 p.m. as well. Hello, Alexis.
Hello. Always something. Look, lots coming up on the show. Obviously, we're going to be keeping tabs with the very latest from Ukraine. I did an interview just before coming on air with Oksana Pokalchuk. She is the director of Amnesty International's Ukraine office, and she has been telling me how Amnesty International have been helping people on the ground. She's got some extraordinary stories. Plus, she's got, what her wish would be for the West, how the West can help. And in fact, that's kind of one of my throwouts today of how are people finding ways to help. I don't know if you caught wind of a tweet that did the rounds yesterday, Hugo, about people renting Airbnb apartments.
Yes, I did see this.
In Kyiv, all over Ukraine, with no intention of going, of course, but just so
as
that
a way
they
of
can
getting money in there.
Getting money into people who've put up their flats on Airbnb. So I'm just asking, what other ways people have found to get money to people in the Ukraine? How are people helping? My political frenemies this week are Robert Halfon, Conservative MP for Harlow, and also the chair of the Education Select Committee, and Emma Lewell-Buck, who's the Labour MP for South Shields, and she was Shadow Education Minister. I've been looking forward to sort of discussing with them all the stories from Ukraine, plus that knighthood for Sir Gavin Williamson, seeing as they were both involved in education. I wonder what their thoughts are going to be on that. Vladimir Ashrukov is also going to be joining us. He is a friend of Alexei Navalny. Of course, it's very difficult to get any voices from Russia to see what's going on in Russia because, of course, any dissenting voices, the Kremlin comes down really hard on them. Jimmy Akimbola is going to be joining us to talk about this new remake of Bel-Air. Remember Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Yes, of course.
There's a new series called Bel-Air.
We reviewed it on the show a few weeks back.
Yeah, and I've seen bits of it. It's a drama, which I didn't expect, but the way the series came together is a really good story, which Jimmy's going to be telling us. We've got a sports panel with Matthew Syed and plenty more on the show.
Magnificent. Well, that is Alexis. He will be here after 1 o'clock, throwing me bodily from my seat as ever. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by the comedian Sarah Kendall, who is the writer and BAFTA-nominated star of the comedy drama Frayed, which has just begun a second series on Sky Max. Let's hear a clip.
What the hell are you doing?
This is my house, you rat. You stole it.
I told you last time that if you ever came onto my property again, I would call the police.
Call the police. I'll tell them about how you lied to me and told me I had to sell everything to cover my dead husband's debts just so you could get your filthy hands on my house.
Wow, that's a boring story. I mean, you could tell the police, but I doubt they'll be able to stay awake because it's such a boring story.
I can barely afford to feed my kids.
Oh, this is getting tragic, but not in an interesting way. Everything I did was legal, Simone.
My name is Sammy.
Yes, of course it is. Simone.
Sammy.
Much as I adore to find you in my garden like some demented Australian gnome, it's time to go. It's over, Simone. You lost.
It's only just started.
So that's Sarah Kendall and Robert Webb in Frayed. And Sarah joins me now. Hello, Sarah. Welcome to the programme.
What a staggering performance to listen to. That was... Wow, that was amazing.
It does start strong. Look, for people for people who have yet to see Frayed, The Fools, tell them a bit more about the premise and where we are at the start of Series 2.
So the premise is an Australian woman. It's set in the 1980s when there were no digital footprints, so you could relocate and lie to everyone and get away with it. And there's an Australian woman, my character. She's moved to London. She's got all these airs and graces. Very posh, very pompous, completely lost her Australian accent, has lied about her background. Then her husband dies in an incident with a prostitute, and she loses everything. She finds out there is no money, they're broke, so she has to move back to Australia. And then at the end of season 1, there's a dead guy. He gets shot. I'm trying to do this as concise as possible.
You've done this very well. Very well.
Thanks.
It's almost like you know it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting to sort of do a 50-word sort of crazy. And then season 2 opens with